I had to forgive myself for not being perfect. I had this unenforceable rule as an Episcopal priest that I can't make a mistake. And that's untenable. We all make mistakes.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Season 2 of Political Forgiveness, Voices of Peace. I'm very excited for two reasons. The theme of Season 2 is personal forgiveness in our daily lives. Many of our guests will be sharing their personal stories of forgiveness, their struggles, and how they overcame these obstacles. Other guests may not have been able to forgive and will share their stories of where they got stuck. And for those who may want help, my co-host and I will be offering live coaching. And this brings me to the other reason why I'm so excited about this season. I have someone joining me as co-host, Dr. Fred Luskin, who is the director of the Stanford Forgiveness Projects, who wrote a number of very successful books on forgiveness, Forgive for Good and Forgive for Love, and now has just published the Forgive for Good Recovery Workbook, along with Lyndon Harris, who is our guest today for our first episode of the season. Fred and I have been dear friends for so many years, and I'm very excited to have him as co-hosting this season with me. So welcome, Fred.
Hey, thank you, Eileen. Hello, everyone. And I'm here to welcome my friend. I met Lyndon years ago when he was really struggling to forgive. And we developed a friendship, and I watched him over the years grapple with his personal injustice and his own resistance. And so when Eileen started talking about this kind of podcast, I thought Lyndon would make an ideal first guest as someone who had not been able to forgive, pretty much learned to forgive, and was honest and open enough about his process where maybe his story would be helpful to some others. So welcome, Lyndon,
Thank
and
you.
it's nice to see you.
Thank you, Fred. Thank you, Eileen. What an honor to be with you all on your podcast.
And for our first session, and by the way, I should mention too that Lyndon, we met years ago. It may have been in Beirut, over at the Garden of Forgiveness in Beirut.
Perhaps I remember meeting you in Arizona
Yeah.
too. Yeah, that's awesome.
Tell us your story.
Okay. I've had 25 years to think about forgiveness because before that, it really didn't mean anything to me because I had it all figured out. But when I had to do the hard work of forgiveness, that's when it began to mean something to me. So let me tell you my story. A long time ago in a city far, far away, I used to be an Episcopal priest. And I was the Episcopal priest in charge of the church across the street from the World Trade Center towers. I started as the priest in charge of that little church in April of 2001. I got there just in time for the towers to be attacked on September 11th that year. I was on staff at Trinity Church, Wall Street, which is 3 blocks south, and my responsibilities were for St. Paul's Chapel. Before 9/11, I had been called to do what we call a church plant at St. Paul's, to do something new and engaging to a younger crowd. So I had a budget to do some really exciting work. The Trinity gave me such great support. And I put together a jazz ensemble, and we were doing a jazz mass in the summer of 2001. If you were walking along the Broadway in Lower Manhattan that summer, you would have heard stately music coming out of St. Paul's. You would have heard some soulful sounds of John Coltrane and Miles Davis and others like that. Having the time of our lives doing that jazz mass. And we took some time off to reconfigure the format so that we could start a whole new program in September. It was going to start September 17th. 9/11 got in the way. I was in my office at Trinity Place, 3 blocks south of St. Paul's Chapel and the Twin Towers, on the morning of 9/11 when the terrorist attacks happened. It was really shocking. Remember writing some emails, and I heard this loud crack, and I went to the window to see what had happened. And papers were flying by. Now, we were 3 blocks south, as I said. Papers were flying by. It looked like a Yankees ticker tape parade. The difference, though, is that the edges of the papers were burned. It had a sinister, scary connotation. So I went up the street to see what had happened. We heard that the towers had been hit by an airplane. I assumed it was a little Cessna, so I ran up the street to see what I could do to help out and got to the foot of the South Tower just in time for the second hijacked airplane to collide with it. And
Wow.
it was indescribable. The apocalyptic fireball that erupted when the second airplane hit the South Tower is just beyond description.
So, Lynn, you had like a bird's eye view
Yeah.
of the second plane hitting the World Trade.
Yeah. In my peripheral
Wow.
vision, I felt the heat and I had to run dodging debris because,
That had
Wow.
to
yeah,
be scary.
I had such nightmares about that for so long afterwards, too. But luckily, I was able to get into, you'll get a kick out of this. The first building that was available for me to duck into was the American Stock Exchange. I didn't stay long. I thought, well, this might be the next building.
Oh,
And
geez.
so I ran back to our offices at 74 Trinity Place. And I got there just in time to help out with the evacuation of the children from our preschool, which was on the third floor in our building. We evacuated them to the basement, thinking standard safety protocol. We got them all in the basement, and one of the teachers started a rendition of Itsy Bitsy Spider. We were singing Itsy Bitsy Spider, and that was a surreal experience. And when the South Tower collapsed, the South Tower was the first one to collapse, the ground shook, and you probably remember that sonic boom that was playing on all the newscasts, the towers pancaking down one on top of the other. And then everything went really quiet. And all of a sudden, this thick black cloud started coming into our building through the air conditioning unit. And it was thick as molasses and burning our eyes. We couldn't see, we couldn't breathe. So we each grabbed a kid and ran out the back of the building away from the towers. We ran south towards the Staten Island ferry terminal and got about halfway there when the North Tower collapsed.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And so in the collapsing of the North Tower, it was just like in the movies, it was this massive cloud of dust and debris that just came down, descended upon us, and covered us head to toe. So the next day, I was able to be evacuated from Lower Manhattan safely, and I didn't sleep that night because I worried about whether or not St. Paul's Chapel had survived and what was going on. I worried about the people at the site who were struggling for their lives. And so the next day, I went downtown to see what I could do to help out. And I assumed that St. Paul's Chapel, my church, had been destroyed. How could it survive? 18th century building standing when the 20th century towers across the street were decimated. Well, I saw that St. Paul's was still standing, and I took that as a sign that we had a big job to do. We set ourselves to doing that big job, and I was able to pull together some volunteers to create a relief mission to support the men and women who were working in the site to rescue survivors. And we set up a food service. Ultimately, we had services like massage therapy, grief counseling. We did meals over the course of the 8.5 months. We served over 500,000 meals to
Wow.
first responders, and we had over 15,000 volunteer shifts served, 12-hour shifts.
Wow.
We had 2 shifts a day, 12 hours each. So it was a big operation. So you can imagine that my superiors, the people I reported to, were not actually at St. Paul's and were not even in the city necessarily. And I just did stuff that I didn't have the authority to do, but I felt it was the right thing to do, and I still feel that way. So I charged ahead without getting permissions. I just set out to do what I thought we needed to do, and I got some pushback over issues like liability, safety, damage to the chapel, all of them legitimate issues from my superiors. I mean, you don't get to be a 300-year-old church without paying attention to things like that, right? But I was the newcomer on the staff. I'd just been there like 4 or 5 months. I didn't understand all that at that point in time. I just did what I felt needed to be done, and that created a lot of friction.
Well, you saw,
Mm.
it sounds like firsthand,
Hmm.
this staggering need.
Oh my God, yes. There was conflict, and I want to be as kind as I can because I'm not saying that I did everything right and they did everything wrong. We all were trying to do our best, but I had a sense of urgency that they didn't have. I was there every day performing last rites on body bags and body parts in the site. I was there every day and I saw the urgent needs and I moved forward with that. And that created conflict for me. And after serving for over 240 days and breathing in that air, I resigned, at the end of it.
Wow.
There was a lot
Wow.
of, well, I'd burned all my bridges. There was no, it became very clear to me that there was not room for me on the staff anymore.
So a lot of people listening can really start grasping that people with different points of view about what's right
Hmm.
can end up in conflict.
Yeah.
And what I'm interested in is how that conflict maybe affected you
Hmm.
and then brought up the problem of forgiveness.
I think the other piece here too is that you, Lyndon, were coming from such a heartfelt place. You saw the
Yes.
tragedies. And so
Yes.
here you were kind of butt up against like
Yes.
administrative kind of stuff, which is very
Yes.
different. And so I could well imagine here you're being an Episcopal priest coming from your
Hmm.
heart and dealing with all this other stuff. And then the trauma you experienced by just seeing all those dead bodies.
It was very traumatic. In fact, soon after I left Trinity, I was diagnosed with a pretty significant PTSD and trauma and depression, and in addition to about 5 or 6 things wrong with my lungs.
Oh, wow.
5 or 6 things. I mean, I couldn't breathe for the first 5 years without using an inhaler.
Oh,
And
my
I
goodness.
still was coughing up black stuff. And I was a part of the World Trade Center Health Registry. And they have been, over the years, have been supportive of me. And I do physicals every so often as a part of their research studies for 9/11 people. But
Wow.
here's how it precipitated forgiveness. I felt that I did the right thing. I felt I did the thing that Jesus would have wanted me to do as a minister of the gospel of Jesus. I felt that I didn't get the support I deserved.
Mhm.
And I became really bitter and I became self righteous. Boy, let me tell you, mortification comes to mind too, because I was so deeply entrenched in being right and how they treated me, how they didn't see what the gospel commanded us to do. And I had all these negative feelings. And oh man, I drank that down like it was the sweetest Kool-Aid I ever had in my life. The Nelson Mandela quotation has been so important to me, that not to forgive is like drinking poison and waiting for your enemies to die from it. Man, I drank a lot of that poison.
What's so interesting is here you are a man of the cloth who knows
Hmm.
about forgiveness
Yeah, yeah.
and struggled with forgiveness.
No, I had no interest in forgiveness. My prayer was not about forgiveness. My prayer was, God, smite them.
So I want
My
we all
revenge fantasy.
right, and I want everybody to hear that because we all have our revenge fantasies.
Yes.
And that's okay
Yeah.
for the moment.
Yeah.
And
It's
hopefully,
natural. It's healthy,
that's right.
but you
Hopefully,
can't stay there.
that's right. Hopefully, it takes us to understanding that there must be a better way
It
is to
took me a
forgive.
while. The person who introduced me to Fred's a guy named Rod Beckstrom. And Rod reached out to me and we had coffee. And he called me after that and he said, Lynn, I've been thinking about your situation. I think you really need to forgive these guys. And I said, do you know what they did to me? Screamed into the phone. I slammed the phone down and then I threw it up against the wall.
I mean, you know this already, Lyndon, but you just described like the poster child of
Oh,
unforgiveness.
yeah.
Somebody offers you help,
Yeah.
and you said, don't you know what they did to me?
Consummate victim. Yeah.
And you took a shovel and dug a little deeper hole for yourself,
Oh,
even though
Fred,
somebody was reaching a hand out.
it wasn't a shovel, it was a backhoe.
What I love about this is that it's so human. We all start
Yeah,
there, and that anger
yeah.
is real. But go ahead with your story.
I was livid. I wanted revenge in the worst kind of way. I just wanted to shame them. That's what I wanted. That was what revenge looked like to me. But it's not what I needed, and it's not what I want now. I'm realizing as I have walked this path of forgiveness, I realized and my mature self showed up finally. Took a long time, but my mature self showed up, and he's not there every day, but most days. And I realized the truth of what Ram Dass said. Gosh, we're all just trying to walk each other home. I don't mean any ill will towards anyone. In fact, I had my own problems. I added to it. I made things so much worse. So I resigned, and my life just tanked from that point on. I tried my best doing different things, but I was really mentally disabled. I had a lot of issues that kept me down. And so I just sank into a depression. And gosh, then my life really just fell apart. I left my marriage. I had lost my job. Soon I would lose my house in foreclosure, find out that I got all this crap in my lungs. And then it took 10 years, but I lost my calling as a priest because of mistakes I made. I thought that having an affair with a parishioner might be what would save me, but I found out that didn't work either. In fact, it made things a whole lot worse. So I was running from the pain in my life, and that's what took so long. As Fred knows, I was just running from the pain. I couldn't face it. It was too much. I had so many things done to me, but I had done so many things to myself.
And you know what I hear, Lyndon,
Yeah.
is that along with anger,
Hmm.
you like we all sprinkled on a lot of self-pity.
Oh, man. Yeah. I had
And
a constant stream of self-pity.
you had a whole pity party going for a number of years.
But at the end of the day, it ultimately wasn't helping me because every time I talked about what they did to me, I was just reinforcing my victim's narrative. And the biggest problem with being a victim is you don't have any power, you don't have agency.
Right. And the interesting thing about that is when we start our pity parties, get into that
Mm.
victim role, we will always find people who will join our party. And
Yeah,
we have to be aware of that because we'll find people say, yeah, you're right, and join in with that.
pretty much anyone I talked to was happy to play that game with me
Mm.
out of their support for me or what they intended as support. But I'll tell you one person who didn't. That was Fred. Fred would listen to me and then he would say, Lyndon, I hear you, but I have a thought I want to share with you. He said, I think if you spent only 50% of your time thinking about how horrible your life sucks and the other 50% looking for blessings, you might be a happier person. When he first said that to me, and I don't know if I've told you this, Fred, but my first thought was, what the hell does he know?
And look at this discussion. There's like multiple streams.
Mhm.
Lyndon experienced real trauma. He was badly treated. He deeply suffered and he contributed to his suffering
Yeah.
through bad
Right.
adaptations.
Yep.
It's not just that his mind
Mhm.
was a problem, he went through real pain and difficulty.
Yeah.
So the question becomes, how did you turn the switch?
Yeah. Listening to what Fred had to say ultimately was one of the key components, but I couldn't get there until I just fell apart.
Mhm.
I moved to North Carolina. I ran out of option in LA. I ran out of money, ran out of options, and pretty much was homeless. And I came back east to help out a friend run a retreat center, and she gave me housing. And so I came back east, middle of nowhere, a little town called Zirconia. Tiggs Pond Retreat Center was what it was called. It's no longer in operation now. Now, a middle of nowhere, tiny little place, doesn't even have a stoplight out there on 54 acres of land. I hit rock bottom and I discovered something about the mountains of Western North Carolina, especially that they're remote. It's kind of like that advertisement for 2001: A Space Odyssey, I think it is. in space, no one can hear you scream. No one could hear me scream in North Carolina, but I did. I really fell apart. And
I think a lot of times that's what needs to happen,
yeah,
and that's where that little willingness of forgiveness comes
yeah.
in. I've spoken to so many people who've shared forgiveness stories with me,
Mhm.
and it's true. They might just say, I can't do this anymore.
Well, I had a couple of options. I could kill myself. That's certainly something I thought about. But I have a daughter, and she's precious to me, and I had real unshakable faith that God still had a role for me and could redeem even the mess I had made of my life. But I could have just checked out. That wasn't in the cards for me. I really had to dig deep into my heart and soul to find the courage to address all the mistakes I'd made in my life and to own them. I had to take responsibility for my life. And little by little, over time, I grew each day in my ability to do that. And thinking about what Fred said, when I really took that to heart and began thinking about what I'm grateful for and what blessings I have in my life, little by little, the tide turned. I mean, if you pay attention to what Fred has to say in that respect and let it sink into your heart, he's got you. I mean, how many blessings? I'm so lucky to be alive. So many people who were right exactly where I was the morning of 9/11 were killed. I'm so lucky to have my family. I'm so lucky to have my health now. I'm so lucky to be back on my feet and writing books about forgiveness. My memoir comes out in June. Fred wrote the foreword for it. It's entitled Forgiveness at Ground Zero.
You know what's also so powerful, Lyndon, and one of the reasons we're doing this is underlying everything you've said is some movement from helplessness, from blame. It's their fault and life was unfair. Somehow moving from that to, hey,
Yeah.
I got this one life.
Yeah.
What can I do with it?
And it's also the power of gratitude.
Yeah.
It's changing our thinking. And this is something that Fred does
Yeah.
talk about. Change the channel.
Yeah.
Start
Yeah.
thinking about the love.
Yeah.
Think about the beauty.
Yeah.
And feel the energy shift in your body
Yeah.
and in your thinking.
Yeah.
And what is forgiveness also about? It's changing the way we think.
Yeah.
Choosing to see the world from a different perspective, from a different lens.
So, Lyndon, what did forgiveness feel like? And what did it do for you as it emerged in you?
So what happened is I realized the truth of the adage that if you blame, you say the same. And I'd already spent a decade there, man. I didn't want to spend any more time there. I was just really exhausted by it and bored with it. I wanted to figure out something new. I'd banged my head against the door of my past. I fought with my past. I couldn't change it. If anyone could, it would have been me because, I tried so hard. I was loyal to my suffering and I couldn't let it go. But when I turned the corner and opened my heart to gratitude, I was finally able to express gratitude for my own life. And that enabled me to forgive myself. I wasn't able to forgive anyone else until I could forgive myself. And I had to forgive myself for a lot of things, but mainly one big idea, and it's something Fred calls an unenforceable rule. I had to forgive myself for not being perfect. Yeah, I had this unenforceable rule as an Episcopal priest that I can't make a mistake. And that's untenable. We all make mistakes, even Superman, because I had such high expectations of myself. But it wasn't until I could own up to my humanity and my own mistakes that I could really connect to my heart and grieve. I had so much anger for so long, Eileen, but then I discovered that maybe it was just disguised for grief because I had so much grief. I had lost so much, life. We talk about forgiveness as making peace with the word no. Well, I'd been given a lot of no's and I didn't do a good job at making peace with them. But finally, I was able, after I kind of had my sort of breakdown or breakthrough living in the mountains of Western North Carolina in an isolated place, I was finally able to be gentle with myself and to realize that I make mistakes like everyone else does, and I need to be kind to myself. That doesn't mean I don't take responsibility for my mistakes, but it means that I take responsibility for caring for myself and embracing my future and not just continuing to be miserable about my past and trying to change the past. So experientially, I think this is where your question is headed, Fred. I had a different experience. I was able to grieve a little more readily. I was able to let things go a little more easily. And I found that when I was able to be kind to myself for my own mistakes, I could be a whole lot kinder to others for their mistakes.
I remember one conversation Lyndon and I had
Mm.
around that time. He was like talking about maybe not being the world's best priest. I remember saying to him, and I'm like a Jewish boy, that being a priest maybe meant also that you had to carry a cross like Jesus.
I didn't want that.
Right, that's what you said. And that it's hard work. Like life suffering is hard work.
What's so ironic here is that truly you are the priest.
Mm,
You carried the cross.
yeah.
You worked with it. You learned to forgive, and you're teaching it to
Mm,
so many people, and it's real.
yeah.
This is not words of just turn the other cheek. This
Right.
is real stuff
Yeah.
that
That's
you
it.
this I mean, when you think about it, this is your ministry.
I see it as I just have a bigger church now
That's right.
because there's a lot
That's
of people
right.
need to forgive.
That you are the true priest that you've always wanted to be.
Oh,
It just did not take the form you thought.
right.
And you went through all those lessons to become
Yeah.
the priest that you are in lay clothes, which means you're
Yeah.
helping so many more people. What is your life like now?
Well, let me say one quick thing and I'll get to that. I'm a huge fan of Richard Rohr, and I love his idea that we come to a spiritual depth in many ways, but two surefire ways to get there are great love and great suffering. And been blessed to have both to see things get real in my life. No more platitudes, no more like playing games. We have limited time, and it's later than we think, as someone said. And, life is precious. And so that's my mission. Whoever is within the sound of my voice, I don't want you to waste another drop of your precious life on resentments or anger or bitterness or regrets. There's a way to work through that and to move forward and to embrace your life. What I had to learn is something Fred has said from the start is that, especially in terms of self forgiveness, it's better to do good than feel bad. After I realized that I had brought a whole lot of this on myself, my temptation then was to wallow in that misery. It's just a backhanded kind of narcissism. And I had to let that go too, because it's more important to do good than feel bad. So, given all that I've been through, I take this as a set of lessons I had to learn that I now want to share with others. I do keynotes and I do coaching as well, forgiveness coaching and workshops for recovery centers on forgiveness for people in recovery. And this is my mission now, and I couldn't be happier. And I feel strong and empowered in it. I have love in my life anew. One of the things that came to me because of my openness to gratitude. Once you open yourself to gratitude, it grows. When I met the love of my life, I got remarried. I'm so happy. I'm healthy again, and I'm working hard to do what I can to help heal the world through using the tools of forgiveness.
So, what would you like to leave our audience with?
I would like to leave the audience with this idea. If you're stuck, you don't have to stay there. Just like the kid who's on the monkey bars on the playground, stuck in the middle, hanging. The only way you can move forward is to let go of the one behind and reach for the next one ahead of you. And everyone who hears us today can do that. And I want you to know that there are resources, there are communities, there is support, there are communities of kindness and compassion who will meet you where you are and help you on this journey. And that's what I want to do now. And that's the legacy I want to leave behind, is that I want people to know that their mistakes are not the definition of who they are, that we all make mistakes, but we are bigger than our mistakes. Our positive intention is greater than any mistake that we can make. So getting over ourselves and moving forward is a big job for so many of us to do in the world today. And I'll tell you, and this is one of the thoughts that burns in me, we don't have a person to waste. We don't have a person to not participate in this healing. So if you're struggling, I hope you will find the peace that you need so that you can help us widen the circle of peace in the world. It's going to take us all, and forgiveness is
Right.
one of the best tools to point us in that direction.
Let me just ask you one more question. Like, in your head, mind, heart, what does it mean that you have forgiven whoever it was that misunderstood you or mistreated you around the experience after 9/11? Like, make that word so that everybody listening can grasp what that means to you.
Thank you for that, Fred, because that is key. That's really been instrumental to my healing. When I think of the people, I have a warm place in my heart for them now. I have a compassion. I have a sense of gratitude for the opportunities they gave to me and trusted me with, because I wouldn't have been there if they hadn't selected me for that job. I mean, they could have picked anybody in the world, but they chose me, gave me that opportunity. I have a warmth in my heart. I no longer have to carry the burden of hatred or anger or bitterness. Those poisons, I no longer have to carry those. And boy, it's a lighter load walking the path of life now.
And they gave you a big gift, even though it didn't seem like at first,
You know,
because those
yeah,
experiences brought you to where you are today.
yeah. You know, it's taken me a long time to get to this place, but Nietzsche, the philosopher, had this concept. He said, amor fati, that we should be lovers of our fate. And I wasn't so sure about that, but now I am. I love my journey now that I've gotten on the other side of it, you know. It's easier to love it.
And I can attest that Lyndon and I, 2 years ago, collaborated on that workbook that you talked about,
Mhm.
Eileen. And the difference in Lyndon's understanding of forgiveness from a completely lived sense
Yeah.
is profound from
Oh,
when
thank you.
I started knowing him
Yeah.
and then when we wrote that book. So I
Yeah.
attest to the reality and depth
Yeah.
of that transformation.
Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you, Fred. Yeah.
Lyndon, if anybody wanted to get in touch with you, how could they do that?
Oh, they could go through my website. It's www.lyndonharris.com, LYNDONHARRIS.com. And my contact information is there. Yeah.
Well, thank you
Oh, my
for
pleasure.
sharing this incredible story. I think it's going to be so inspiring to so many people who will be listening to the podcast, and just show them the difficulties.
Yeah.
Even if you're a priest,
Yeah.
you don't even think about forgiveness
Yeah.
as your first go-to,
Right.
but hopefully now hearing your story,
Yeah.
they will start thinking about forgiveness
Yeah.
as their first go-to.
Yeah.
And I think my takeaway is when you blame, I really love that.
You know, what I say about that is been there, done that, still paying for the t-shirt. I think I paid for it now. Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to say, Fred, before we close?
Thank you, Lyndon. It's
Mm.
nice to see you articulate the learning and growth that you've experienced.
Thanks to both of you and Fred especially. Thank you for being so much more than friend and mentor to me over the years. You really have been a source of healing and inspiration, and it changed my life. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, and until then, may forgiveness always be in your hearts.
Amen.
Thank you for listening to Voices of Peace, Personal Forgiveness, where I hope you were inspired by the stories you heard of those practicing forgiveness in their daily lives and how this can help in creating social change. If you know of anyone who would benefit from hearing this episode, please share it. For more information on forgiveness, you can go to my website, drboris.com, where you can find the latest information on forgiveness, as well as sign up for the newsletter. And please remember to like and subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.